Good morning, everybody. I want to welcome you to our first meeting of the year. I want to welcome all the new and returning members to our Committee on Veterans Affairs, and we're first going to hold an organizational meeting for the 114th Congress. We're going to start with approval of the committee rules, approval of actions of our respective caucuses, approval of committee staff, and finally approval of the oversight plan for our committee for this Congress. And as we begin the 114th Congress, I want to congratulate my good friend and fellow Florida Gator, Ms. Corrine Brown, on her role as the ranking member. I look forward to advice and some of your sage wisdom from over 20 years of membership on this committee, working with veterans from all across this country. I would at this point recognize her for her opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I'm really excited about being the ranking member. I started out on this committee as the in-person. I was the runt. And after, you can know that after 22 years, you can become the chair of the ranking member. Hard work and perseverance. And so I'm just very happy. We have a big job because we have veterans that need to be serviced. And what I've really always cared about this committee is that it has always been the most bipartisan committee in the House of Representatives. And so I'm very, very excited about being able to be the ranking member. Let me just say I have one task that I want to take just a moment to say thank you. One of our council staff person is leaving. This is her last day after this meeting, and I just want to give her a token of all of the appreciation that, you know, I know you think the members do everything, but if we didn't have good staff, we'd be in real trouble. And so I just want to give you this token.
Thank you so much.
And we have, this is his first day, her replacement, and he's here. And why don't you just stand up and give us like a 30-second, and then I'll turn it back over to the chairman. Would you turn that mic on, please? Mm-hmm.
Thank you, ma'am. My name is Don Phillips. I'm a retired Army veteran and worked on the Hill before with a lot of time in the Pentagon and commanding both active, Guard, and Reserve forces, and I'm happy to be a part of the minority staff.
Thank you. And Mr. Chairman?
Thank you very much. Again, the agenda for our business meeting is provided in the first page of the packet that's been provided to you. First item of business will be consideration of a resolution adopting the proposed committee rules for the 114th Congress. The changes to the rules were sent to your office previously. Under the proposed rules, the committee will have 4 subcommittees: the Subcommittee on Disability Assistance and Memorial Affairs, the Subcommittee on Economic Opportunity, the Subcommittee on Health, and the Subcommittee on Oversight and Investigation. The proposed rules describe its jurisdiction for each of those subcommittees. There were a couple of minor changes proposed to our rules for this Congress compared to the committee rules of the 113th. We had one technical and conforming rule on the committee requirements for naming VA facilities. The other really minor change provided the committee with greater flexibility in requiring when written testimony is provided by witnesses prior to a hearing. Are there any discussions on the proposed rules? Hearing none, I recognize Ms. Brown for a motion to approve the resolution adopting the proposed rules for the 114th Congress.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. And I move that we adopt the rules by Mr. Miller for the 114th Congress as proposed.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. The ayes have it. And we will now consider a resolution establishing the subcommittee ratios. Now, the full committee ratio is 14 to 10. The ratios that Ms. Brown and I have agreed upon for the subcommittees are Disability Assistance and Memorial Affairs 5 to 3, Economic Opportunity 5 to 4, Health 7 to 5, and Oversight and Investigations 6 to 4. And I recognize Ms. Brown for a motion to adopt the resolution establishing the ratios for our subcommittees.
I move that the committee adopt the resolution offered by Mr. Miller for the number of members of each standing subcommittee.
All those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, no. The ayes have it. The ayes have it. And the motion is agreed to. The next item of business is consideration of a resolution to designate the committee vice chairman and the subcommittee chairman. Under the resolution, Mr. Gus Bilirakis, from Florida also, will serve as the vice chair of the full committee. Dr. Abraham is going to serve as the chairman of the subcommittee on disability assistance and memorial affairs. Dr. Winstrup will serve as the chairman of the subcommittee on economic opportunity. Dr. Benishek will serve as the chairman of the subcommittee on health, and Mr. Kaufman will continue to serve as the chairman of the subcommittee on oversight and investigations. And I want to thank these highly capable members who have agreed to take on the demanding leadership responsibilities of chairing a subcommittee, and I do appreciate your willingness to do so, and I look forward to working with each of you in your new capacity. I also want to thank Mr. Bilirakis for agreeing to serve as the subcommittee or the full committee vice chairman. And again, I want to thank the subcommittee chairman for their willingness to serve. Mr. Lamborn, you are recognized to adopt a resolution.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we accept the resolution listing the full committee vice chairman and subcommittee chairman as written.
Thank you, members. All those in favor will say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. The ayes have it. The next resolution before the committee is to designate the ranking minority members of the subcommittees. The minority members met last night to designate their ranking members of the subcommittees, so I would ask unanimous consent to consider a resolution to reflect the actions of their caucus. Hearing no objection, so ordered, and I would recognize Ms. Brown to offer the resolution.
The resolution approving our ranking member is in front of you, and I urge the adoption.
Thank you very much, and I ask Mr. Takano, if he would, for a motion to adopt the resolution designating the ranking minority members.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the committee adopt the resolution offered by Ms. Brown, providing for the ranking members of the standing subcommittees of the Committee for the 114th Congress.
Thank you very much. Members, all those in favor will say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. And our next resolution for the consideration of designates the majority members of the subcommittees. The list is before each of you. I recognize Mr. Lamborn for a motion to adopt the resolution designating the majority members of the subcommittees.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we accept the resolution listing the Republican membership for the committee's subcommittees as written.
Thank you very much. All those in favor would say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The ayes have it. The next resolution for consideration is to be offered by Ms. Brown. It designates the minority members of their subcommittees.
The resolution approving our ranking members is in front of you, and I urge the adoption.
I now recognize Mr. Takano for a motion to approve the resolution designating the minority members.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the committee adopt the resolution offered by Ms. Brown, providing for the minority membership of the standing subcommittees of the Committee for the 114th Congress.
All those in favor will say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries, and we're going to consider the resolution approving committee staff. The list of staff is before each of you this morning. The committee has a top-quality, highly experienced and knowledgeable staff, many of them who are veterans themselves. Ms. Brown and I are confident that our staffs will be very responsive to committee and non-committee members alike and their staff. Ms. Brown, you're recognized for a motion to adopt the resolution approving the committee staff.
I move that the committee adopt the resolution offered by Mr. Miller approving committee staff.
All those in favor will say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The ayes have it. And the first order of business for our newly constituted committees is adoption of the oversight plan for the 114th Congress. The proposed plan before you is the result of consultation between the majority and minority staffs and has been agreed to by Ms. Brown and myself. The proposed oversight plan outlines the committee's agenda for the next 2 years. We consider this a basic blueprint for our oversight activities. However, it is not an exclusive plan, and member participation is welcome to develop other issues and areas of interest during the Congress as they might arise. Is there any discussion on the oversight plan? I recognize Ms. Brown for a motion to approve the proposed oversight plan.
I move that the committee adopt the resolution offered by Mr. Miller providing for the adoption of the oversight plan for the 114th Congress.
All those in favor will say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it, and thank you all for your attendance and participation. I do look forward to working with each of you to improve the lives of our honored veterans. I would ask unanimous consent that all members would have 5 legislative days with which to revise and extend their remarks during today's organizational meeting. Hearing no objections, so ordered. And this concludes our business meeting for today.
No, I have to have a picture with you on it.
You know what? I'll take my official photo of the Air Force. This is with a red. It'll look nice with the red.
It looks nice.
That'll be my official photo. Thank you again.
All right, thank you. She's going to the Air Force.
Yeah, that's what she said. Yeah. All right, here we go. Ladies and gentlemen, the hearing will come to order. I'd like to welcome everybody to today's hearing entitled Building a Better VA, Assessing Ongoing Major Construction Management Problems Within the Department. The purpose of this hearing is to address continued problems occurring in VA's persistent construction delays and cost overruns involving its construction of the replacement Aurora, Colorado VA Medical Center. The VA has been found by the Civilian Board of Contract Appeals to have breached its contract with its prime contractor on this project, and the facility could eventually cost over $1 billion to complete. This committee has held numerous hearings in the last few years involving VA's inadequate management of its construction projects, each of those hearings being based on considerable evidence. Quote, "We have come to a point in VA's major construction program where the administrative structure is an obstacle that is not effective supporting the mission. As a result, our veterans are the ones who are left without services, and our taxpayers are the ones who are left holding the check or writing a new one," end quote. Members, this was part of an opening statement that I made March 27th of 2012 at a hearing on VA major construction, but it seems that nothing has changed nearly 3 years later. Despite warnings and corrective suggestions being presented from inside and outside of the department, very little has changed. Based on the lengthy committee investigations that gave rise to these hearings, the committee asked the GAO to audit VA major construction projects. Their report, issued in April of 2013, found that on average, the hospital construction projects reviewed were about 3 years late and $360 million over budget. Now, every time we have asked VA about those results, it has argued that it is not delayed or over budget based on its own accounting. Further, when we held a hearing on the Aurora VA MC construction project in April of 2014, the tenor of VA responses was that it was the contractor's fault that the project was not completed and that it was still operating within its budget. I have a feeling that the VA will not be able to cling to those illusions any longer, because December 9th of 2014, the CBCA found that the VA materially breached its contract with its prime contractor on the Aurora construction project, Kiewit Turner. It found that VA did not provide a design that could be built within the stated budget, and it was also the VA's fault to the point that CBCA said KT would be well within its rights to simply walk off the job. And that's exactly what was done. Now VA is left scrambling to make KT whole enough to get back to work. VA may even have to come back to Congress to ask for perhaps $500 million or more to fix the problems that the committee has brought to light year after year, only to be ignored by the VA. Now, I visited the Aurora construction site on Monday with Congressman Kaufman and Congressman Lamborn to see again in person what is taking so long and why this project has been a veritable money pit for the last several years. Once completed, this facility will be well equipped to provide the best possible care available, which is exactly what the veterans served by every VA facility deserve. It's long past time for these projects marred by bureaucratic ineptitude to be complete. And I look forward to hearing from the VA and other witnesses here today on how we can correct the abysmal state that VA's major construction program has been for years. With that, I yield to the ranking member, Ms. Brown, for any opening statements she may have.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I would like my complete statement to be entered into the record. As I said from the beginning, I am very excited about being the ranking member on this committee, and having been on this committee for over almost 23 years, I realized that for over 20 years, the Congress have not built any VA facilities. And so a lot of the expertise that you would think would be there had long passed. And so I think the role of this committee is to find out whether or not, or how we're going to move forward in making sure that the VA is able to provide the facilities that we need. Because before we did the authorization, 20 years was when we authorized Las Vegas, Orlando, Denver, New Orleans. And so those facilities have had problems. Part of the problem have been with VA, but part of the problem also have been with maybe the selection of the contractors. It's not just one issue, it is a multiplicity of issues. So I am just really looking forward to hear what the VA and others have to say about how we move forward. And with that, I'm going to yield back to my time because I want to hear what the VA and others have to say about this problem.
Thank you very much, Ms. Brown. Members would ask that you waive your opening statements. They will be entered into the record as custom in our committee without objection, so ordered. Our first panel today, we're going to hear from the Honorable Sloan Gibson, Deputy Secretary for the Department of Veterans Affairs. He's accompanied by Mr. Dennis Milston, Associate Executive Director of the Office for Programs and Plans within VA's Office of Construction and Facilities Management. We're also going to hear from Mr. Lloyd Caldwell, Director of Military Programs for the Army Corps of Engineers. Your complete written statements will be made a part of the record, and I want to say for the record, thank you for meeting with me on Monday in Aurora. It's good to see you again, and Deputy Secretary Gibson, you're recognized for your opening statement for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairman Miller, Ranking Member Brown, distinguished members of the committee, thank you for this opportunity to update the committee on construction of the Denver VA Medical Center in Aurora and the actions that we are taking in light of this situation. Let me introduce Dennis Milston to the committee. Dennis is Director of VA's Construction and Facilities Management Office of Operations. In the wake of the board's decision on Denver, I asked Dennis to serve as senior leader on that project. He brings over 3 decades of construction experience in both the public sector and private sector, including 19 years with the Corps of Engineers on projects like the Pentagon renovation. Chairman Miller, Representative Kaufman, and Representative Lamborn, thank all 3 of you for joining us at the site. Thanks for taking the time to be there. I don't think anything can take the place of actually being on the ground and seeing the facility and gaining an appreciation for the scale and for, if you imagine what that facility will be like for veterans once it's completed. I want to acknowledge some important partners. We have a long history of collaboration with the Corps of Engineers. We're grateful for their advise and support role in the interim agreement with Kiewit-Turner, and we're pleased that they're going to serve as our agent to manage this project to completion. Yesterday, I met again with leaders of Kiewit-Turner. KT is justifiably proud of the work they've done in Denver, and they are looking forward to seeing the medical center complete and serving Colorado's veterans. And we appreciate the good work of the Government Accountability Office, including their recommendations in 2013 that we have integrated into our current construction practices. We will continue to collaborate with these and other partners as well as this committee as we move forward. To be clear, the situation in Denver is unacceptable, and I apologize for that. It's not acceptable to veterans, it's not acceptable to taxpayers, it's certainly not acceptable to Secretary McDonald or me. Veterans and taxpayers are right to expect more, and they deserve much better from their VA. We have two priorities in Denver: complete the facility without further delay and deliver, under the circumstances, the best value that we can for taxpayers. I understand that everyone is anxious to know what it will cost to complete the project. Right now, we don't know, the Corps doesn't know, and Kiewit Turner doesn't know. That will be determined over the course of the next several months, and we'll work closely with Congress to develop the best options for funding completion. Most immediately, to settle claims and continue operations under the interim agreement, we're going to request reprogramming on some selected projects, taking care to minimize the impact on other projects while we are working to get Denver back on track. I think it's a very fair question to ask what went wrong in Denver. I think as we explore the history of the project, it will be clear that there were many things. Among them, we did not have in place the benefit of a 35% design before we requested funding. We did not have in place a clear, structured, effective process to manage change. We didn't benefit from rigorous constructability reviews. And perhaps most fundamentally, our choice, timing, and management of the integrated design and contract vehicle resulted in a design that was never reconciled with the firm target price in the construction contract. While we work to complete the project without further delay and deliver the best value we can, we have an obligation to ensure that this never happens again. That means learning all we can from past mistakes and putting in place corrective actions to improve future performance. Veterans and taxpayers also expect that a thorough review be completed and those responsible be held accountable. There are several steps we are taking with these objectives in mind. We've asked the Corps to complete a detailed review of the Denver project, to review VA's other largest projects, and in general to review the department's management of major projects. I have directed that an administrative investigation board be convened to examine all aspects of the Denver project, to determine the facts that led to the current situation, and gather evidence of any mismanagement that contributed to this unacceptable outcome. And effective immediately, the department's construction and facilities management organization will report to me through the VA's Office of Management. Stepping back for a moment from this immediate situation, I recall that in the months prior to my confirmation, I spent a lot of time reviewing hearing testimony, media clips, and IG and GAO reports. Coming in from the private sector, I had serious doubts about VA's construction management capability. But what I found when I got to VA were many important changes already implemented. In some instances, changes that would improve projects that were already underway, but in every instance that would improve newly started projects. For example, we were already committed to designs that emphasized functionality and good value. We were already requiring a 35% design before publishing cost and schedule information and requesting funding. We were already using private construction management firms for constructability reviews at each major design phase. We were already using project management plans to improve communication among all participants. We were already integrating medical equipment planners into construction project teams. We had already put in place thorough risk management practices to mitigate challenges. We had already set up project review boards modeled on the Corps of Engineers district office design. And we had already added key talent from the outside of the department, strengthened training, and required project management certification for our project leaders. That does not excuse our failure to have these measures in place years ago, but it does mean that as they are relevant to particular phases of projects in construction, these and other measures are being applied now to our 53 ongoing major projects. Notwithstanding all these changes already in place, I'm confident that our current construction management practices can be further improved. My commitment is that we will learn all we can from the mistakes in Denver, as revealed by the Corps' examination and our own internal review. And we will implement changes with two fundamental criteria in mind: doing the right thing for veterans and getting the best value for taxpayers. Finally, I don't want to lose sight of the fact that while we resolve the situation in Denver, the employees of the VA Eastern Colorado healthcare system have continued to provide quality care to our veterans nonstop, regardless of any issues with construction of the new medical center. Thank you for the opportunity to testify, and we look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gibson. Mr. Caldwell, thank you for being here. Again, thank you for meeting with us. On Monday, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman and distinguished members of the committee, I'm pleased to be with you today representing the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers and Lieutenant General Thomas Bostic, the Chief of Engineers. I provide leadership for execution of the Corps' engineering and construction programs worldwide, to include our support to other agencies. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers is one of the Department of Defense construction agents who execute infrastructure projects for the Department of Defense. Interagency collaboration is an important element of the Corps' work as a part of our service to the nation. My testimony will address the Corps' assistance to the Department of Veterans Affairs, a bit of our project acquisition process, and our experience in medical facility construction. The Corps has an established relationship with the VA from the national headquarters levels to our regional offices, working with the 21 Veterans Integrated Service Network offices, as well as with the National Cemetery Administration. We've supported a broad range of construction and maintenance projects totaling almost $1.6 billion with the VA since 2007. Authority for the Corps' work with the Veterans Administration is based on the Economy Act, which provides both parties with sufficient authorities to work collaboratively on VA projects. In December of 2014, the VA requested our assistance to complete the Aurora, Colorado Replacement VA Medical Center project, and we have agreed to do so. We are assessing the requirements of the project and are developing a new interagency agreement that would transition construction agent authority and responsibility for this project to the Corps of Engineers. We're also advising the VA on the management of their interim construction contract with the contractor, Kiewit Turner, to allow continued progress on the project. The Corps has developed processes and capabilities for design and construction, which have been refined over the many years. Our project management process brings together teams of diverse professionals that are necessary for the project life cycle to deliver a successful project. And that includes our construction, our acquisition, our design professionals, as well as project management professionals. These teams work collaboratively to account for project delivery, methods, scope, schedule, and cost. The Aurora project is unique in that we are entering the project at an advanced stage of the work, but with an assessment by our experts and with collaboration with the VA, we are confident that we can bring the project to successful completion. Budget and schedule risk is inherent in executing any construction projects, and medical facilities are among the most complex facilities that we construct and deliver. They require exacting technical design and construction standards, which must be carefully managed and are subject to changing requirements to evolving medical technology, even during construction. To assure the standards and criteria of the defense health system within which we most often operate, we have established a medical center of expertise which applies a full range of specialized knowledge to address demanding healthcare facility requirements. They help to integrate the clinician and other medical staff requirements to architectural and engineering standards. The Corps has a long history of executing some of the nation's most challenging construction programs. In the past 13 years, the Corps has physically completed 2,499 military construction projects, to include for other agencies, with a combined program amount of $52 billion. The Corps has delivered, or is in the process of designing and constructing, a full range of medical facilities for the Department of Defense, to include hospitals valued near $1 billion, that are capable of delivering world-class medical services for the members of our armed forces and their families. Our relationship with VA is strong, and we look forward to working with the VA as construction agent to complete the Aurora Hospital project, and in doing so, to serve the nation's veterans. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for inviting the Corps to testify to address its assistance to the Department of Veterans Affairs. I welcome your questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Caldwell. We appreciate you being here to testify and also accept questions from members of the full committee. At this point, I want to yield my time for questions to the gentleman that represents the facility that we are here to talk about today, the subcommittee chairman for Oversight and Investigations, Mr. Kaufman. Mr. Kaufman, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Milston, in its February 2014 fact sheet, VA had the total completion of the Aurora facility at 42%. On Monday, Deputy Secretary Gibson confirmed that the total completion of the project is now 50%. KT, however, maintains that the project is only 40% complete. Either way, how has this project only progressed at best by 8% in nearly a year?
One of the things that goes into this process of determining percentages, we were basing our percentages of completion on an artificial budget, and so we've lost some perspective on what the actual construction completion date is. We are percentages. We have had some discussions, and it is somewhere between 50 and 40. My experience from looking at this, we have the steel completed, we have the precast completed, we have roofs on facilities, we have curtain walls going up. We are about 50% complete with this construction.
Deputy Secretary Gibson, VA is convening an administrative investigation board to investigate the Aurora project because VA central office officials have no idea what happened. Again, despite years of warnings from inside and outside the department, who at VA central office was tasked with providing oversight for the Aurora construction project?
I think you would look to the chain of command within construction and facilities management, which would include Stella Fiotas, who is a relatively more recent addition to VA. It would include Glenn Hagstrom. It would include former deputy secretary and the secretary.
Who is in charge of overseeing Glenn Hagstrom?
The person in that position reports to the deputy secretary.
Okay, so that would be your
It would be me now,
position.
yes.
Okay, and also Deputy Secretary Gibson, why was the department standard operating procedure opposed to involving the Army Corps for so long in Aurora, despite repeated warnings of VA mismanagement?
Having not been a part of that discussion process over the years, I don't know that I have a good answer for you. I think as I looked at the situation following the board's decision, it was very clear to me with the priorities to complete the project without further delay and with the best value for taxpayers that engaging the Corps was the right course of action on this project.
Okay. Mr. Milston, what is the estimated total cost of the Aurora project, and what is now the estimated date for completion?
First of all, the estimated date of completion, we're looking for a date in 2017 based on where we are today. And as far as the cost to complete, that's something that the Corps of Engineers is going through to determine what the cost to complete this project is. As the Deputy Secretary Gibson said, we will spend the next couple of months trying to figure that out, because between the contractor, us, and the Corps of Engineers, we don't have that number today.
Okay. And I think, Secretary Gibson, I think in our discussions on Monday, I think you discussed when the project may run out of money, and I think it kind of sort of corresponds in with the interim agreement. You think about, with your programming capabilities, you think about June, sometime in June, if there's not some type of supplemental appropriation by Congress, that work could stop again on this project.
The idea here is for us to be able to go through some steps. We funded the interim contract We're actually doing some internal reprogramming with the notice to Congress of some small additional amount. We'll need to come to Congress for approval to reprogram some more substantial amount to carry us on the interim contract all the way through till June. Our hope is, and our expectation as we sync this up with the Corps of Engineers, is that we're going to be able to provide the funding. The expectation is we will provide the funding to bridge the period from where we are right now till when the Corps is able to negotiate a contract to complete the project.
My final question, Mr. Caldwell, would it, as bad as the cost overruns are right now, we're hundreds of millions of dollars over budget, we're years behind schedule, but if in fact this project were mothballed, if in fact Congress didn't appropriate more money and the construction stopped in June and the whole project was demobilized, mothballed, wouldn't that really greatly aggravate the cost when the project would be restarted?
Yes, sir. In fact, it would cause a worse situation because you can't, to begin with, you have to take certain actions to close up a project, so you're using funds that otherwise would be used for construction to ensure that you're not creating a different hazard for the public and so forth, and that the facility that is constructed doesn't degrade. So there's some caretaker requirements associated with that, and then to restart it, it would be an additional cost as well.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Before I yield to Ms. Brown, Deputy Secretary, in your reprogramming, do you anticipate the dollars that you reprogram to exceed the cap of 800 or 880 with your ability to go above that?
I do expect that that would be the case, and we would need help and support from this committee and from Congress to raise that cap.
Yeah, the cap will have to be raised. I mean,
Yes.
you cannot go around it. It is a firm,
Right.
firm cap. So at what point do you think you'll know what number that will be? I mean, because surely it will be before June. Or are you going to try and do it all at one time and just have one?
No, we will need that support prior to June. Congressman Kaufman and I have been having a series of conversations about that. We think raising the cap to $1.1 billion from the current $800 million would be able to carry us during that interim period of time.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Brown?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And as I told you earlier, I would have loved to have joined you all in Denver, but of course it was Martin Luther King's birthday, and I was not able to be there. But in the future, when y'all plan trips, I'm sure I will be able to accommodate you all so I can be on site.
We would love to host
Yes,
you out there.
Thank you. Now, the problem that we're having in Denver, the problem that we're having in Orlando or New Orleans, and, you know, I want to talk about Denver, but, you know, everything is down and to the right. And so to the right is Orlando. And we've been working on that facility for over 25 years. And I'm going to say that I think a lot of the expertise, 20 years not building a facility, is part of the problem. And can you give us not just an update on these projects, but tell us what we need to do as Congress to help you move forward? If it's more of a closer working relationship with the Army Corps that we work very closely with in many projects in my area. You know, they do great work with the ports. You did great work with Katrina. So would you just kind of bring me up to date?
Yes, ma'am. First of all, as it relates to Orlando, the current schedule would call for construction to be complete the end of February.
And then we'll do the punch, whatever that is.
We're working through the punch list. As you know, some portions of the facility have already been turned over, and in fact, we're already seeing patients. The progress really accelerated in Orlando as we got different leadership teams, both parties on the ground, and a series of meetings that I held directly with Brassfield and Gorey over the previous 7 or 8 months. And I think we've moved out very expeditiously, and Brassfield and Gorey has performed really very well on that project. I would say more broadly, and Congressman Kaufman and I have had conversations about the expanded role for the Corps. Turning everything over to the Corps would be a very big decision, and it would be a decision that we would want to make on a very well-informed basis. I think some of the work that the Corps is doing for us right now to review Denver and our other major construction activity will inform that process. As I mentioned in my opening remarks, what we're after is quite simply doing the right thing for veterans and being a good steward of taxpayer dollars. And those are really the only two parameters. If a more expansive role for the Corps is the best route to get there, then we're all for it. And frankly, I would be surprised if we don't find ourselves working more closely with the Corps in the future.
Right. One of the things in the facility that we did in Jacksonville, I think it's very important to have the physicians and others in the planning as we do maybe more design build, have them there, because in the Orlando area, it constantly changed because the doctors wanted the latest equipment, which I understand, but when you have to take down a wall and reprogram it, then it drags the project on.
I think one of the lessons learned is the need to impose more discipline throughout the entire process. That includes a very rigorous requirements definition period, and then the requirements get locked down. That also includes a more robust communication with various stakeholders, including members of Congress. I think what we have done habitually is conducted a fair amount of this behind the curtain, sometimes because we're engaged in procurement-sensitive activity, sort of been the excuse. We got to find ways to work around that so that we're able to engage with various stakeholders on these projects on the front end, and we've got good consensus and awareness, and where it's not, where there's not 100% agreement, which there oftentimes may not be, at least there's an awareness in place of where we're going and why we're going there.
Can you just give us briefly, what is the status of the Denver project now? Is it moving forward, and how much additional funds will you need to move it forward?
The construction is back underway at Denver. Kiewit Turner is ramping up the number of trade on the site literally every single day. We expect to be back up to about 1,000 on the site by, I believe they told us, by the end of March. I'm not mistaken, which is close to where they were prior to the shutdown. We're operating under the interim contract. We'll need some additional funds through a reprogramming action to extend that period of time, and then bridge us to the period when the Corps is able to negotiate a contract to complete.
Just one quick question for Mr. Coswell. The Army Corps involvement in this project, and you mentioned that you all have been involved in building many hospitals all over the world, and of course I'm aware of that. How is the partnership working?
The reports I've received have been very positive. We have sent a team of about 17 people to the project beginning in January. We actually had a couple of people there in mid-December, and we've had a couple of our senior executives attend meetings there. And all reports that I'm receiving from them have been very positive, that the Veterans Administration team that's on site has been very open and cooperative. And so we believe it'll be a collaborative relationship as we go forward.
Thank you. I yield back the balance of my time.
Thank you very much, Ms. Brown. Mr. Lamborn, you were also in the meeting on Monday. You're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, and thank you, Mr. Chairman, for being there, coming from Florida. And I want to, first of all, recognize Representative Kaufman and his foresight and leadership. When he was first saying the Army Corps of Engineers need to be brought in, a lot of people didn't believe him. And yet here they are now, literally sitting at the table. So I appreciate that. Secretary Gibson, we are all very concerned about the cost overruns and the time delays with the Denver hospital. Can you reassure veterans in Colorado that the time delays will not prevent veterans from receiving the health care that they need in the meantime?
As I mentioned during my opening remarks, the Eastern Colorado VA healthcare system continues to provide great care to veterans. Most recent number, probably the month of December, November, December, 64,000 outpatient appointments completed during that month. 92% of those appointments completed within 30 days of when the veteran wanted to be seen. Still not good enough, but it tells me that there's an awful lot of great care being delivered there. We're also ramping up both choice and also referrals to care in the community under VA's traditional non-VA care. So we are committed to delivering to veterans right now and for the interim period of time the best possible care.
Okay. Okay, thank you. And for either one of you, and we've touched briefly on this, but when specifically will we know the final and best estimate of the cost overrun so we on this committee can begin the difficult work of identifying funds needed to bring the hospital to completion?
I'll try to answer that and then defer to the two experts here. The process that we're going to have to go through here, and this was a topic of robust discussion just yesterday with the senior leaders at KT, in a contract negotiation, typically price is the last thing that falls out of the process. And so we're applying a lot of pressure to our teams to dig together collaboratively to provide as much information as early as we possibly can. But I think a general time frame, some clarity several months from now is going to be about the earliest I think we can hope to have a good idea.
Okay, several months from now, and that's as
Yes.
specific as we can be right now.
That's as specific as I would want to be, yes, sir.
Okay. And I know you don't want to get ahead where wrong figures are thrown out there creating false expectations.
You know, I think one of the biggest problems we ran into in this project is we tried to push to a firm target price before we had everything locked down. We rushed to get there. We were anxious. We were impatient. I think a lot of that probably had to do with the fact that it had taken forever to get to that point anyway, and so everybody wanted to get on with it, and I think that's why we find ourselves sitting here today.
Okay.
You know, I want to do this right.
Exactly. And I understand that. I mean, we are eager to move forward, but we want to do it right.
Yes, sir.
And lastly, for either one of you, has the VA considered developing a standard hospital design template in light of all the current major construction overruns that could be used throughout the country with only minor local modifications, which would, I believe, potentially save tens of millions of dollars on each project?
Sir, I'm happy to say that we have begun that program. We look at our clinics, our leased clinics. We've developed some standards to go forward. One of the things that each one of our medical centers has is a unique program of services that they provide to the veterans. So, correct, yes, sir. So what we're looking to do is develop templates that we can then say, if we've got a 1A hospital with 10 operating rooms is the workload, this is the configuration or template that we would use. And then by adjusting the adjacencies, looking at the physical constraints of the site, we can then build the building blocks that cut down on the design effort, cut down on the customization, if you will, and develop that better value for the taxpayers. And this is experience that we've learned from the Army Corps of Engineers. They've done it with barracks, dining halls. They're doing it with some of their facilities. We work hand in hand with them on our space and equipment planning programs so that when we program out a hospital, we're using the same kind of background information that they use also. So this is something we're also looking at our other partners within the federal space and within the other medical communities to make sure we get hospital templates that can be delivered, that we can cut down the design effort, because one of the things that cuts down on the change orders on the back end is something that's important, an important driver. It's speed to delivery. If I can cut down the distance between when a project gets visualized and doctors come up with their requirements and delivery of it, we cut down on the amount of change and turmoil that goes on in a project.
Okay, thank you for being here today. Thank you for being in Denver on Monday.
Mr. Takano, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Gibson, I understand that the VA is reprogramming funds to the short-term contract with KT until a long-term contract can be completed. Can you tell me where the funds are coming from that are being reprogrammed?
We have not identified the projects yet. The analysis that we're going through is we're trying to identify projects where we can reprogram funds with the least possible adverse impact on that project from a timetable standpoint. And the intention certainly is going to be that we replenish those reprogrammed funds as quickly as we possibly can.
Okay. On January 19th, the Veterans Administration announced it was convening an administrative investigation board. Can you please walk this committee through the timeline and what you will accomplish by convening this board, the steps that are going to be taken, and who will preside over this board and who will serve on the board, and any other details that you can tell us?
Sure, I'll tell you what I can. An administrative investigative board is a formal investigative process that we use inside the department to investigate and gather evidence to support any misconduct, any wrongdoing, any management negligence, or the like. It is a fairly routine measure, routine mechanism that's applied at various levels across the department. This would be one that would be, it's being established at my direction, and our Office of Accountability Review is working to constitute that AIB, typically formed of 3, in this case it will be 3 senior executives. Part of our challenge here on this particular AIB is having people with the right expertise. And so we're working, I expect over the next several weeks, to identify individuals, likely from outside the department, from other federal departments, who will come and serve on this AIB because they bring that particular expertise with them. The investigative process will last, my guess is in this particular case, many weeks, if not several months at least, as they work through to gather evidence. These projects have been in various degrees, various stages for a decade. I think the challenge will be to focus on specific episodes in the history of these projects, do a much deeper dive, exploring exactly what happened, who the involved parties were, what their responsibilities were, and was there any negligence or any mismanagement that happened, and where that happened, to gather the evidence that then becomes the basis for an administrative action.
Mr. Caldwell, you're with the Corps of Engineers, is that correct?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
Can you tell me, what is it going to cost the VA for the transfer of authority to the Army Corps?
Sir, as we have determined what the scope of the effort is, part of that will be to determine what our cost is to execute that scope. Our initial work now that we're doing, the VA has provided funds to us just based on an estimate of the number of people and the amount of time that they'll be working to scope out the requirements. Typically on large projects of this nature, if we were starting at the beginning, we would program an amount of about 5.6% for our cost to administer the contract and perform the requirements, and then there's additional funds for design. So something in that order of magnitude would be likely, although it could be greater in this case because the nature of what we're dealing with here is greater. So the manner in which that operates is that we will assess what the requirements are, we'll assess the level of effort, we will develop a budget and provide that budget to the Veterans Administration, and then our objective is to operate within that budget once the two parties have agreed to it.
But as of now, you're still trying to assess those costs?
Yes, sir. At this point in time, we've got a bit of distance to go to have assessed what the entire scope of requirements are for this project.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My time is up.
Thank you very much. Mr. Milston, after the CBCA found that the VA, quote, does not have sufficient funds to pay for construction of the entire project as currently designed and has no plans to ask for money, end quote. So the question is, why were there no plans after GAO alerted the VA to significant cost overruns and delays in April of 2013, and this committee has held 3 hearings highlighting the same thing going back to March 2012, May of 2013, and April of 2014.
Excuse me. I don't have a good answer for why we didn't come back and ask for funds, other than the fact that our project teams out there on site felt that the hospital could in fact be built within the budget. They were relying on the advice of many people within the department to continue pushing this project forward.
On the 22nd of December, our staffs had conversations regarding the way ahead or the next steps at Aurora. Your staff at that time, according to my staff, promised to provide the committee with a risk assessment complete with cost estimates by the end of the following business day. As you know, we don't have that. And from the testimony at the table today, it doesn't appear we're getting it anytime soon. Why would somebody promise that without the capability of delivering?
If I could address that, the response, Mr. Chairman, I think Mr. Milston misspoke that day. It was just a bit out over the end of his skis. As we've looked at that request, and I think you're aware that we offered to make that document available in camera late last week to members of the staff or members of the committee. As we've discussed this with the Corps, and as we discussed a little bit on Monday, being able to keep close hold information that could potentially influence the ultimate negotiation of a contract is something that we need to be very cautious about. And there is information in the risk assessment that could compromise those conversations.
Again, as we have discussed in the past, and I have great understanding of not wanting to compromise any negotiations, but Congress has total oversight. And if we were at the beginning of the project, that might be one thing. But we're in the middle of something now, and it's not like the committee would intend to make anything public. But, you know, and you have opened the central office much more than it had in the past, and we appreciate that. And, you know, I understand what getting out over your skis means, even though I come from the great state of Florida. Ours is on the water.
You can do that on the water, too.
Yeah,
I've learned
I
that.
tell you, it hurts when you get out over your skis. So, Mr. Gibson, talk a little bit about accountability within the agency, because we're not talking about one project. We're talking about a number of projects, and we're not talking about a small amount of money. We're talking about tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars in cost overruns. The veterans are most important, and to get the projects completed, we understand that. But, you know, there was complete inept abilities at a number of levels, and I think, I don't think you necessarily need to name names here, but help assure this committee that something is going to be done from within that would prevent this from ever occurring again.
Yeah, I think, first of all, you know that I haven't exactly been bashful about enforcing accountability where we had evidence to support that. Clearly, veterans and taxpayers and members of Congress, their elected representatives, expect us to conduct a thorough review, and where folks have not done their jobs, that we hold them accountable. And my commitment is that we will do that. That's why we asked the Corps to undertake an objective, and Joe Calcara, who you met on the project, is leading that effort for the Corps. And in my conversations with him, I made it very clear, what I want is on-the-ground truth. Call it like you see it. I don't want you to pull any punches. I want to understand what went wrong here. We need to understand that. And the same guidance will go to the members of the AIB once that investigative board is formed, to ensure that we understand exactly who is accountable at what point for what decisions and what activities throughout the life of this project.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Before we move on, may I have just 30 seconds?
Certainly.
I was at that particular meeting where we had a lengthy discussion, and I felt that the person was, I don't want to say being threatened, but was pushed to the point that he said things that perhaps I didn't think it was appropriate, because a legal lawsuit was also going on. And I think maybe we should hear from counsel, our counsel, as to our questioning when there is an active lawsuit against the VA, so it is against us. And I think we need to consider that when we're asking questions of the panel or the committee.
I certainly understand that, but remember that the VA is part of the administration, and so the lawsuit is against the administration, not against the Congress. And we cannot abdicate our responsibility to provide oversight, and I know that you and I will work together, and we have assured the agency and the central office that we want to be a partner as we try to resolve that. We wouldn't want to do anything that would imperil any legal action that may be taken, but your comments are taken for the record and well-deserved.
Thank you. I agree. As the Army motto, one team, one fight, we're all in this together, and it's all taxpayers' dollars, and we got to make sure that we protect them. So I yield back the balance of my time.
Okay, thank you very much. And I've got some other questions, but I know there's other members that want to talk, and even though Ms. Brown just took 2 minutes of my time, I would now yield to Ms. Brownlee for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I wanted to just follow up on the chairman's questioning around accountability too. And do you have any sort of timeline? I think if evidence proves that steps need to be taken to hold people accountable within the VA going through this process, do you have a timeline that you can share with us?
The honest and direct answer is no. And the reason has to do with the uniqueness of this particular investigation and the complexity of the issues. I think our success is going to depend on our ability to focus, as I mentioned earlier, on particular episodes. And if we do that, I would expect that that an investigation could be completed within probably several months' time. But it's not something, this is collecting sworn testimony and a formal and elaborate process, because again, if we're going to take administrative action, the evidence that we collect has to withstand scrutiny on appeal.
So we can expect in a couple of months' time, give or take a little bit, that we would have a timeline at that particular point.
I would be delighted to keep the members updated on the progress of the AIB, as I am aware of it.
Thank you very much. My veterans in Ventura County in California are extremely, extremely excited about the prospects and an upcoming plan to build a new community clinic in our county, really, truly to fulfill really long-awaited unmet needs for our veterans, like dialysis treatment, expanded physical therapy, mental health, primary care services, and so on. And so, you know, when I hear and understand these cost overruns and delays, it makes me very concerned about future projects. And so if you could just speak to what you are doing, you know, within the VA to ensure that these kinds of cost overruns and long delays aren't going to repeat itself again. I know construction projects are tough and nothing can be perfect, but I want to have some sense of a feeling of security that these kinds of things aren't going to happen. We're going to repeat the same mistakes.
Yes, ma'am. Some of the things that we're undertaking as we go forward is developing a 35% plan before we come forward for funding, which then makes sure that the funding that we ask for is based on a sound set of requirements. This is a similar process to the Corps uses in the Milcon process, so that it, again, eliminates some of that back and forth on what the requirements are. We've instituted a requirements change management process that says at the completion of 35%, the project is examined for how does it go against what the department approved as part of its strategic plan. That, again, is looked at about the 65% to make sure that the project didn't grow without clear, concise reasons for the growth, and that those changes were approved both in budget and in program or square footage and meet the strategic needs of the department. That project is then again reviewed against the base requirement at the completion of the design before we move into construction. In addition to that, we've instituted a program of contracting with the construction managers out there in the industry to come in and perform a rigorous constructability review. Again, this is something similar to what the Corps does with their constructability, bidability reviews that they go through to make sure that the requirement can be built. And this begins to eliminate some of those change orders that come and delays that come downstream. So those are some very important pieces that we've put in place. In addition to that, we've adopted a project review board process similar to the Corps that has my boss looking at the projects on a periodic basis as they begin to see indicators come up that say their risks are getting a little high or their costs are getting close to the programmed amounts, so that we have the ability as a department to intervene and get things back on track before they go totally off the rails and we have no option. So those are some of the big things that we have put in place to make sure that we have control on our projects going forward.
And this is all modeled after the Army Corps and their military construction.
Yes, it is, and that's because we have recently acquired a whole bunch of people with Corps of Engineers experience, and we're looking to put those sorts of controls that a significant number of them are familiar with and have demonstrated some success.
Thank you. I yield back.
Dr. Rowe.
Thank you all for being here, and also thank you for taking on this very difficult project. And not to be too flippant, or not to be, I'm sort of going back 40 years. This is a FUBAR on steroids, if I've ever heard one or seen one. And I look at this, and I've been involved in building a medical center, an office building, another hospital and an office building, another community hospital LEED certified, and a $20 million office building. And my practice is currently in all projects came in under budget and on time. And I find this the most astonishing. I feel like I'm in the twilight zone when I listen to this. And if you're in private business, and Mr. Secretary, you understand this extremely well, your lenders won't lend you any more money.
That's right.
You go out, you put a project like this would have been shut down and mothballed years ago because it's so outrageous. And what I've heard is, I want to ask just a few questions, and I want to make this statement. After listening to this and listening to Ms. Brown for the last several years here, I'm not sure the VA ought to ever build a hospital. I mean, this is not rocket science. There are 5,700 hospitals in the United States operating right now. And this one just can't ever seem to get to the finish line. It's amazing to me how badly this has been done. And what I heard also today is there's no timeline for accountability, maybe sometime this year, and we still don't have any idea how much it's going to cost. When this hospital first was bid out, what was the number that was put out there? So when the bid was made, we were supposed to build this hospital for, how much was that?
The initial contract with the builder was for a firm target price of $604 and a ceiling of $610.
Okay, so you had a $600 million hospital.
Yes.
So what I just heard a minute ago, and I heard the secretary say that the next number we're going to hear is $1.1 billion, and that's not the end of it. And just for the English translation for poor country people like me, reprogramming means you're going to take money from one project and move it over to another project, but you still need the money in the first project to move the money from. Am I right about that? So it's not less money. We're still going to, and I think we ought to be honest about that. We're at $1.1 billion, and we don't know what the next number is going to be. Am I right?
That is absolutely right. The $1.1 billion includes not only the $600 million from construction, it includes the land acquisition, it includes the architects and engineers, it includes the construction management and other incidental costs associated with managing the project. So there are other elements to the $1.1 billion.
And just for, look, I've been in practice in medicine for over 40 years. And yes, technology is going to change. The hospital I started practicing, the new hospital 35 years ago, looks very different today. You're going to make modifications to it. But building an operating room is building an operating room. If you're building one for cardiac surgery, we know what that looks like by the thousands in this country. And I, for the life of me, cannot understand how you could miss a number by 100%. And the other thing Ms. Brownlee brought up was, to date, and this project started when? When did somebody go with a shovel and everybody stand out there and get their picture?
There was actually dirt moving in 2010.
2010, so 5 years ago, and the original completion date was when?
3 years after that.
So 13.
14, actually.
And now we're looking at 17 maybe. And so I certainly can understand the frustration of the veterans who would be in this, I think, a phenomenal facility if it ever gets built. But do you think that the VA ought to build another hospital after this and after Orlando, and we've got, I guess, Louisville coming up, and that right, it's going to be built? Or should we just give that to a company that builds hospitals and tell them what you want, and let them go build it, and get a competent contractor and a competent architect and go build it?
I think the answer to that question,
Why should I up here? It's embarrassing for me to go back and face my taxpayers at home and the veterans at home when they keep saying, Doc, when's this building going to be done? And we keep saying, and she's been saying this now for years. So
well,
maybe
it's
should we go
embarrassing.
another
It's
route?
embarrassing to me too, sir.
Well, I know you didn't. I'm not blaming you, Mr. Secretary. You weren't there at the original. You haven't been on the team very long. But I'm just asking a rhetorical question: should the VA build another facility?
I think it's a
Should
fair
it
question.
Let the private sector build.
I think it's a fair question, and I think as we look at the Corps' assessment that we've asked them to do on this and the other major projects that are under construction or have recently been completed, I think they come back and they look at what went wrong, and they look at our structure and our processes, and with that as part of the information, we make an informed decision about, okay, how do we do this part of our business in the future? And it may well be that the best outcome for veterans and for taxpayers is that we turn to the Corps and we say, Corps, we want you to build our hospitals from now on. That may be the decision, and if it is, so be it. That's all I'm after. I want the best decision based on those two parameters.
Well, I don't see how it could have been done much worse.
No, on this one, I don't either. I think, frankly, and I alluded to it earlier, that the crux of the issue here happened as we were trying to push to get to a firm target price. And we were doing that without having design completed. Yeah. And what we did is we set up an inherent conflict, and then we obligated ourselves to deliver a design that could be built for $604 million when the design was still moving. And we never reconciled those two. We never forced the issue. And so you're right, it is a mess, and it is what you referred to as FUBAR.
Thank you for taking this on. I yield back.
I'm not going to say anything. Ms. Titus, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm glad to learn what FUBAR means. I didn't know that.
Oh, ma'am, I didn't say that now.
Well, you know I represent Las Vegas, Mr. Chairman, and I've appreciated working with you, and I thank you for being here. It's very important that we talk about this issue, not just because of problems that exist now, but we've invested a lot in future expansion and more facilities. We want to be sure that they work right. The hospital in Las Vegas had a lot of problems. You're aware of that. It was too small by the time it got built. They had to build a new emergency room. They've built it and opened it in pieces, so that's confusing to the veteran of what services are actually available. You've given me some information in the past, and you probably don't have this right in front of you, but I would ask that the VA give me some kind of hard facts about when it's going to be open and what the time timeline is for all the facilities and all of that associated with the hospital, if I could get that from you in the future.
Yes, ma'am, of course.
Thank you. Now, one other thing is that it seems to me we need to take one step back. You've talked about all the improvements in terms of more oversight for the contractors and the bids and how you're going to do the construction. But I think that part of the problem is the metrics leading up to the decision of what to build and what to put in a facility. It's one of those build it and they will come. In Las Vegas, it was anticipated that once you had a hospital, the number of veterans served would increase by 2%. In Las Vegas, it increased by 19%. We're going to have more veterans who need these facilities. There are going to be different kinds of veterans with more serious problems, more women veterans. So can you tell me what y'all are doing about the metrics in advance of deciding what you need and what to build?
Yes, ma'am. One of the other pieces that we've instituted in the department is a return to, if you will, market area master planning. So we take an area, in this case we're working with a VISN, and we look at all of the needs within the division. The department sends down a set of gaps that they've identified that need to be closed by the VISN, and then a rigorous process is undertaken. It takes about a year and a half to go through this, where we look at both capital and non-capital solutions to close these gaps, and then we put the facility master plan together that then informs the SCIP process, the strategic capital plan going forward, so that we have a true look at where we're going, that we have a departmental control on the facilities that fill into a marketplace, that we have a better defined requirement, which cuts down on changes later on, cuts down on that flux, and it will get our facilities built in the right fashion. And then after the project is built, we've gone back to instituting we have instituted a post-occupancy evaluation that comes back in and says, okay, here was a set of gaps or requirements that the project was set to meet. Did we in fact meet them? And if we didn't, then we still have something to accomplish, and we also develop a lesson learned that says the way to close this gap may not be that particular path, so that we don't repeat the same mistakes over and over again.
And then if I understand correctly, we use a 10-year planning horizon so that we're not looking out, a year or 2 years, that we're looking much farther down the road, forecasting changes in veteran population and unique patient growth.
Well, I would just encourage you to work closely with local forecasters, economic and demographic forecasters, whether it's at the university or think tanks, so you can anticipate growth. That seems to be a factor that hasn't been
One of the things we're doing is we're bringing in planning consultants that have that kind of expertise and have the ability to reach into the marketplace. We're not depending upon our own in-house ability to forecast. We're looking at how we bring consultants in that have that experience, the same experience that supports the private sector, in informing them on their healthcare building decisions would be then helping us to forecast our needs.
Okay, that's good. I'm glad to hear that. And I would just again say, please keep in mind women veterans. The secretary has assured me of that. The chairman has promised to hold a hearing on the needs of women veterans, and always keep that in mind. And I look forward to getting the information about the Las Vegas Hospital. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. Dr. Benishek, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Gibson, Dr. Rowe really said a lot of the things that I wanted to say, and to me, I'm frankly shocked, and I completely agree with Dr. Rowe in that I don't see why I would want to ever trust the VA to build another thing ever. I mean, the answers that you've given here, the reasons why this has all happened, sound to me like you never built a hospital before. We should have had the plans in before we did the bidding. Yeah. I mean, the answers don't make any sense to me. My question from what Dr. Rowe has said, has anyone been disciplined during this whole process?
There have been, in Denver, for example, the project executive and the contracting officer were removed from those particular positions. But I would tell you the more comprehensive look at what happened in Denver will be undertaken by the AIB and informed also
Frankly,
by
one of your earlier answers sort of shocked me into we're looking for evidence of mismanagement. Well, the fact that there's a cost overrun of $500 million is kind of a priori evidence that there's been mismanagement. And the answer that you're going to look for mismanagement
And so
doesn't wash with me.
The issue is being able to document the individual accountability with evidence. Because what will happen is if we take an action and we don't document it with demonstrating that that particular individual was accountable for that particular issue and have the evidence to support that, our decisions are just going to get overturned. So we have to go through this process to gather that evidence.
It just seems very difficult to me, Mr. Gibson.
Does to me. Does to me, too.
My opinion coming out of this committee, we shouldn't allow the VA to ever do any construction project again. They should just be bid out to the private sector and let the Army Corps of Engineers, because if you're telling me that you can't even discipline the people that cost $500 million cost overrun because you don't have the right tools or your management plan or your union plan doesn't allow that to happen, there's a real problem here, and American taxpayers are paying for it, and our veterans are paying for it for the lack of their care. And you know, I just don't get it. Let me ask another question here now. Do you know what the average cost per square foot of this hospital is going to end up being?
We won't know the answer to that question until we know the estimated cost to complete.
All right. How much money have you spent already on the project?
Roughly $800 million has been obligated.
So that's the money that you spent already?
The majority of that is spent, not quite all, but all of that has been obligated.
So that's more than the original, $200,000 more than the original bid price of the project.
Well, as I mentioned earlier, there was a construction contract of about $600 million that didn't include architect and engineer fees, construction management fees, the acquisition of the land, the site preparation, and other costs that are associated with building a project of this complexity and size.
So those costs were taken into the account of the original price of the project?
They were taken into account.
So what was the original price of the project supposed to be?
The original appropriated amount was somewhere just south of $800 million.
So we've spent all the money that we originally thought we were going to spend, but we only got a project that's half done.
That is correct.
All right. I don't have any more questions. I'll yield back the remainder of my time.
Ms. Custer, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And just for the record, I share our colleagues' frustration, and it's clear that all of you do as well. I want to learn from this in terms of going forward, and there was a comment in our brief about the model of hub and spoke medical services in the VA. And I'm just wondering, given everything we've heard today and that we've known for a few years now about the cost overruns, the complexity, I think I noted your comment about cutting speed to delivery. It seems exponential. The longer the delay, the more change orders, the more change in the scope. And I think certainly my colleague, Ms. Titus, talking about let's try to be more focused on projecting what the needs are. But given all of that, I'm just wondering, is there any thought going on now at the VA, and this is for Mr. Gibson, about whether this hub and spoke model is the best model? Should we be trying to create these mega centers, medical centers, and in particular, in light of the major reform that this Congress passed and the President signed back in July about the concept of sending our veterans for private pay. In many parts of the country, we have outstanding tertiary healthcare facilities that are complex and expensive to duplicate within the VA system. So I'll just leave it for your comment.
I think first it's important to note that what came first were the hubs, and that what you've seen happen at VA is, as has happened across all of medicine in the United States over the last several decades, is a movement toward primarily an ambulatory care or outpatient care model. That is where the vast majority of our care is delivered. And so what we've done over the last 20 years is create these outpatient clinics much more convenient, much more readily accessible to provide a large portion of the healthcare services that our veterans require.
And presumably less costly to build.
Yes, they are. In fact, we've used, principally, we've used a lease structure in order to be able to pursue that dramatic expansion. But there are still requirements, care requirements for veterans that will need hospitalization. So, as is the case in this particular instance, it's an instance of replacing an old and outdated facility. Now, the question you raise is part of a much longer and philosophical kind of question about the role for non-VA care, the requirements to maintain continuity of care, and the recognition that the typical VA healthcare patient is older, sicker, and poorer than the average population. And so there's a sense here of not, do we just dump those veterans onto the public health care market and let them fend for themselves in terms of achieving the best health care outcomes, or do we look to build an integrated system which would include medical facilities or hospitals as part of that system, but recognizing that some health care can and should be provided in the community?
And I appreciate that, the reality test, because I think that's part of it in terms of Congress. Our oversight is about the care for the veterans.
Yes.
And the precious tax dollars and where we find that balance. But I think for the American people and for members of Congress, we need to address this issue that veterans are coming back with much more complex medical conditions. Veterans are aging, and as you say, due to the challenges that they have less resources on their own to seek their own care. So I appreciate all that you're doing. I am taking up the mantle of being the ranking minority in the Oversight Committee, and intend to work very closely with my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to help maintain the balance, or hopefully restore the balance of providing the care in a timely way.
Thank you for your continued support and service, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Custer. Now to a new member of our committee from New York, Mr. Zeldin. You're recognized.
Thank you, Chairman Miller, and I appreciate you recognizing that I'm a new member, because I'm going to ask a new question. In one of Mr. Kaufman's questions with regards to going from a 42% estimate, going up 8% over the course of the year, Mr. Milson, you referred to a term called an artificial budget. Can you tell me what an artificial budget is?
When the court decision came down and they said that we had failed to deliver a design that could be built for the contract amount of 604, we had been measuring progress against 604, and we were measuring it as a term of art where we use work in place. So what we paid for was then evaluated against what the total contract was. Well, the reality, what the civilian board told us is that the number was completely wrong. And so that's the artificial piece that we were measuring against. So when we were, there were fact sheets that showed that I think that we were as high as 62% at one time out there, but that was against that 604 number for what we had put in place. And when the board came down and said that number doesn't hold any water, that's the artificial piece that I was talking about.
I also understand from the questioning that you need an authorization by June, but that it's going to be at least several months before we know how much money you need. I'm just trying to understand, would we find out how much money you need before you're actually getting the money?
There is two steps in here. The first thing that's required will be, or requested, will be an increase in the authorization in order to allow us to continue to operate during this interim period of time. for reasons that were explained earlier. The best course of action, we believe, is that we keep construction underway at this project rather than shuttering, mothballing, and demobilizing activity on the project. So we will need an increase in the ceiling prior to June, probably within the next 60 days or so, in order to support a higher level of spending during this interim period. Then there'll have to be another one later on for the full construction cost.
Right now, the contractor is working at the site. What budget is the contractor operating off of? What are their numbers?
When we put the interim contract in place, what we did is we funded it with $70 million, $50 million to cover month-to-month new work that's being undertaken based upon a detailed schedule that's being developed between Kiewit-Turner and VA that focuses work on critical path items. Plus, there is about $20 million available for settlement of subcontractor disputes. And so we're going to be allocating another $31 million into the contract, and we've got some amount of money left that was unobligated under the contract that we'll also use to settle subcontractor disputes.
The $50 to $70 million numbers, is that between now and June? Is that per month?
That will likely, what we did in the interim contract is we put those amounts in place for a 90-day period of time. So whichever we run out of first, time or money, that ends that contract. Both parties reserve the right to extend it. And our expectation is to extend it because we don't believe the Corps will be in a position to enter into a contract to complete the project until probably June.
Mr. Takano was asking you about the investigation. Is it possible that people who are responsible for negligence are still working on this project?
I think it's unlikely. As I mentioned, we've changed the reporting relationship for construction and facilities management. So that removes one particular senior executive. I mentioned earlier that we had also changed out the project executive and the contracting officer. I would tell you the project executive we have on the scene now and have had since April is a star, young fellow named Kevin Lindsay that came to us from the Corps of Engineers.
Mr. Caldwell, real quick question. Has the Army Corps ever built a hospital before?
Yes, we have. Within the last, let's say, since 2007, about 12 either have been completed or under construction.
Okay, great. So this was very informative for me, Chairman Miller. I've heard this new term of artificial budgeting. Ms. Brownlee was asking for a timeline of when she's going to get a timeline, asking for funding without knowing what the cost is. I came from the state legislature in New York with $200,000. Our county, which has the second highest vets population of any county in the country, highest in the state, with $200,000, we created a program for PTSD, hundreds of veterans, and we're saving lives with $200,000. And the concern is when you're $500 million over budget, you're taking money away from other programs that can save lives and give care to our veterans who need it and deserve it. So I actually think the whole thing is pretty outrageous, and I'm very grateful Chairman Miller's having this hearing, and Mr. Kaufman is advocating so hard to keep us informed.
Thank you, Mr. Zeldin. Welcome to Congress. Mr. O'Rourke.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Since we last met, there was a tragic shooting at the El Paso VA.
You can stop the clock on this. Don't need to clock him on this. Go ahead.
And I just wanted to take a moment, and I know that I speak for you and for the committee in extending our condolences to the family of Dr. Fjordbach, who, following 9/11, left a lucrative practice, moved to El Paso to work at the VA and help treat our veterans who are returning from Afghanistan and in Iraq, including veterans who had served in previous wars, and from everything we know about him, exemplified the kind of service and commitment to excellence that we want to see more of in the VA. And I want to thank the Secretary for the leadership at the El Paso VA. Your interim director, Pete Dancy, is doing a remarkable job. And as tragic as this shooting and this murder was, I know that the El Paso VA is going to come back better and stronger than ever. And I'd also like to conclude this part of my time by thanking all of the employees, many of whom are veterans, the frontline staff, the doctors, the providers, the mental health experts, the volunteers who do a remarkable job in El Paso day in and day out under some very trying circumstances, especially following this shooting on January 6th. And I commit to you, Mr. Secretary, that we will do everything we can to support that staff, be there for them, and make them stronger than ever going forward.
Thank you. Your support means the world to me, and I know to them.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to continue by developing on the theme that we're looking at today in terms of the VA's opportunities and competence when it comes to building major medical facilities and providing world-class care and outcomes for our veterans in a timely fashion. Again, despite what I think are the best efforts of a truly remarkable team at the El Paso VA, due to a number of factors from staffing to resources to leadership in some cases, we have not been able to deliver on that for the veterans. What I hear day in and day out from the veterans that I represent and serve is that when they can get in, they're treated like royalty and very infrequently have any complaints at all. The struggle, of course, has been getting into the VA in the first place, or having an appointment that is not canceled, or not having your records dropped or erased, or not feeling like you have been forgotten. One of the other factors that makes it difficult to deliver world-class care in El Paso and to better serve our veterans is the age and the state of the facility that we're in today. And you were kind enough, Mr. Secretary, to visit El Paso in July of last year. And after a tour of the facility, you confirmed that conclusion that we have reached now for a very long time in El Paso, that the facility we have is inadequate, insufficient, and unacceptable, and we can and must do better for our veterans and for those who serve them out of that facility. Further complicating things in El Paso is William Beaumont Army Medical Center is building a new $1.1 billion facility 9 miles away from its currently co-located position with the VA Health Clinic. We have what I would say is an opportunity right now to decide what we can do to improve the kind of facility, the delivery of care, and the access to that care in El Paso. There are a number of partners there who want to work with you and want to work with us, including Texas Tech, which has the Paul L. Foster School of Medicine, the first four-year medical school built anywhere along the U.S.-Mexico border. We have University Medical Center. We have Tenet and HCA hospitals. We have a community, though one of the poorest from income and property values, is one of the richest in service, that is willing to get behind this and make it a success. I want to follow up on your commitment to take El Paso from one of the worst performing to one of the best, and I want to help answer Dr. Rowe's question and the question that you agreed was a valid one, which is, should the VA be in the business of building these facilities? We certainly don't expect $1.1 billion to be spent in El Paso, Texas. We would gladly take it. We're not expecting it. What we will offer is that through these partnerships, through the commitment and funding from the local community, we can make a deal for the VA that would prevent you from building a brand new facility or a hospital that I think there are some serious questions about the competency of the VA to do just that. And instead, perhaps test or prove a different model in the delivery of health care. It would solve, I think, a lot of problems for VA nationally while meeting the expectations that we should have in El Paso of having world-class care for each and every veteran. Now, we received a memo that was written by VHA under Secretary Clancy August 18th of last year that said within 60 days they would have a game plan for such a facility. I probably don't have to tell you that today, at least in our office, we do not have a copy of any such plan. And despite, I think, our polite but insistent demand that we see one and be a partner in that, we have yet to see anything. Current Secretary Bob McDonald, who also visited El Paso recently, and we want to thank him for that, that was following the shooting, have both expressed to me your commitment, but I need to see some follow-through. I need to be part of that process that you admitted often happens behind closed doors and doesn't involve members of Congress. I want to be your partner in this. I don't want to be your adversary. But after 2 years and documented failings, including by VHA and the OIG, we absolutely need something better, and we need to be part of it. So what I'm asking you today is from all the lessons that we've learned from Aurora, from Florida, from other facilities, and from the opportunity that we have in El Paso, will you commit to working with us? Will you dedicate someone, even on a part-time basis, to working with this community to develop that plan? We will be your partner in implementing it.
Yes, we will. I think one of the things both Bob and I have emphasized in our months at the department is the need to build on the strategic partnerships we have had in our communities. And I think El Paso is a great example of that. As you and I discussed a couple of months back, we really don't have a way forward there. And we're not positioned for success in El Paso today, and we need to get ourselves positioned for success. And I think the circumstances on the ground you just outlined very ably could create an ideal opportunity for us to leverage on those local partnerships and do the right thing for veterans and be good stewards of taxpayer dollars.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. And I'll conclude by saying that we will follow up this week to share what we have assembled and to gain from you what you have and your team has built. And then from there, I think we need to move very quickly to implement something.
I understand.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Costello, another new member who asked to be on this committee from the great state of Pennsylvania. You're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And applying my experience as a real estate lawyer who's been involved in acquisition and land use approval and development and construction matters, but not focusing on what happened pre-bid award to KT. I want to share a couple observations with you, and looking through the materials, I'm just going to cite right from them. First, the CBCA finding that the VA delayed progress of construction by delaying the processing of design changes and change orders, quoting, "Much of the blame for this situation must be ascribed to the VA by failing to control the joint venture design team, delaying approval of the design, presenting KT with a design which was allegedly complete but required an enormous number of modifications, failing to process change orders for approximately 1 year." And then you look at Mr. Chang's emails, two in particular stand out. A June 12, 2013 email where he says, "We hired a senior resident engineer who's never done anything that we have been doing in CFM, but he won't take advice from those who came from the VA system. The budget, schedule, and scope are not in control. I have no clue when this project is going to be finished and how much it is going to cost when this project is done." That was in June of 2013. It concerns me from a construction management perspective, again, leaving aside the design aspects that went into the actual bid to which the contract was awarded. It concerns me from a construction management perspective that the moment that someone within the VA organization would send an email like that or feel that way, that it wouldn't simply freeze at that point and say, this problem is too big for us. We need to go somewhere else and get subject matter expertise. Because when you are designing, when you are managing a construction project, and when you are bringing into the fold construction management firms or a construction manager, you're not hiring them for a project that 95% of which is going to go right. There's always going to be modifications or change orders along the way. You're hiring that construction management firm or individual for when things are going to go really, really bad so that it doesn't become worse. And when you go back, I think it's a year earlier in an email, Mr. Chang indicates, all I can say, this is a year prior to the email that I just cited to, all I can say is the storm is coming. How we got into this mess, it's simple. Scope, schedule, and budget were not managed. No leadership, no knowledge and experience in this business, not following handbook, no skill in organization. That points to, I think, a much more fundamental dynamic here, which is that subject matter expertise on very sophisticated construction projects like this do not reside in the VA. And so moving forward, similar to what Congressman Rowe said and other members here, I just question whether as part of a general budget, we should be looking to fill subject matter expertise of that sophistication when it's really better outsourced. And so I'd like you to share your comments moving forward on the types of questions you're going to be asking yourself and what you're going to be presenting to the chairman in this committee on whether maybe you just don't want to be in the business of building hospitals. Maybe that's something better outsourced, so that, frankly, again, looking at what the CBCA's findings were, a lot of the additional, at least some of the additional cost is actually a function of not merely mismanagement, but not managing it. It's not just the design, it's the management or the lack of management here that's caused further delays and caused further expense. And I think that that's the real troubling, that's the deeply troubling aspect of the overall problem.
I'm sure you understand, based on your experience, that using a construction a contract vehicle such as IDC or construction management at risk, in order for that to work effectively, you have to have very strong project leadership on the job. And frankly, we didn't have it. And those emails and the things that you just read make it very clear that we did not have it. I would love for you to have the opportunity to come visit this facility today and sit down and spend time with the project engineer, project executive on this particular facility, and surmise from your own objective observations whether or not that's the kind of person we want leading complex projects, whether we do our own hospitals in the future or not. I've already put that on the table, and I said perfectly willing for us to look at that. All I'm after is what's best for veterans, what's the right thing for taxpayers. And if that means turning over major hospital construction to the Corps of Engineers, I think that's fine. But that's a big decision. Let's make it an informed decision.
And my only follow-up to that would simply be, within a project this big, you're talking about a team of highly skilled professionals.
Yes.
And all of whom not only hold the project accountable, but hold one another accountable.
Yes.
And the other underlying concern here is that there was not, I feel, at least from what I've seen, a lot of accountability within that team.
There was not.
And that led to even more
You were right.
runaway expense, and I think that really is a testament to what happens when we try and have bureaucracy. And this isn't a criticism directed at you, but a more broader point. That's what happens when we have bureaucracy trying to do too many things rather than what they're specifically designed to do. And what you're specifically designed to do is not build hospitals. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ms. Radewagen, who is another new member who asked to be on this, who comes from the furthest location from any committee member of the American Samoa.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's an honor and privilege for me to be a member of this committee. As you know, each May is Asian Pacific American Heritage Month and National Military Appreciation Month. And over the years, I've traveled around to many bases to celebrate with the military. And I've discovered that American Samoa's vets, like other vets, they tend to settle near the base they were last stationed at because their families have settled in and their children are in school. We have 3 major exports: canned tuna, NFL football players, and soldiers, military personnel. Veterans make up 10% of the territory's population, so access to veterans' health care is deeply important, and I look forward to working with this committee. My question, Secretary Gibson, is how long will it take to get a new long-term contract with KT? Can you please explain the process that will be taken to get to that point?
Do you want me to answer that one, Lloyd? I'd be glad to. Or let me take a shot at it, and then I'll let Lloyd chime in here. The Corps has an assessment team on the ground in and out at Denver right now. They're experts from all over the country. These are chiefs of sections, not deputies. It's a very expert team. They're going through their assessment. They are developing right now an acquisition plan, and they will go through that process and have that acquisition plan presented, and everyone would hope approved during the month of February. And then between the month of February and their target time period is June. During that period of time, they would go through the careful, close work with KT, supported by VA, to determine the schedule, to determine the scope of work, to ensure that the design has been completely locked down, and ultimately to determine the cost to complete and settle on a contract vehicle to enter into with whether that's KT or whether that's another party. That would be determined as part of the acquisition strategy. So that's the general time frame.
Thank you. And lastly, Mr. Milston, if you plan to move money from other major construction projects that Congress has appropriated money to build, what is stopping those projects from being mired down by the same cost overruns and delays that current VA major construction projects are facing?
One of the things that we're looking at as we go forward with this reprogramming effort is to find those projects that taking some of the money off them will not or will have minimal impact on their ability to go forward. We continue to press for the speed to delivery to get these facilities done, and as part of any effort, we want to work with the committee and with Congress to replenish those funds that we reprogram off so that those projects can keep on track to provide those services to veterans.
I would also point out the number of improvements that have been implemented over the last couple of years that are being applied currently, as well as the lessons that we will learn from the Corps' review of Denver, as well as other major construction projects, to ensure that we are using the very best practices possible in all of our projects.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Mr. Radewagen. And before we go to the second panel, Ms. Brown, you have some comments?
Yes, sir. Thank you. A couple of things. Mr. Secretary, the committee is asking me exactly when do we expect the Orlando Hospital to be complete, because they want invitations to come down. And former members want invitations to come.
Yes, ma'am.
So we all want to participate.
We will plan a major celebration for the ribbon cutting in Orlando. I know construction is scheduled to be complete the end of February, but there's an activation period that will follow that where we're moving equipment in and all that sort of thing. We'll be sure to get dates to the committee ahead of time.
We will ask the committee to formally come down for a site visit when we open. In addition to that, as we close out, I want to say that I mentioned at the beginning that it was 20 years before VA built any hospitals, which I just think that we had to lose some of the expertise that we need in building. But I do think we need to separate building a hospital from building a clinic, because I don't want to misspeak, but I don't think we've had the same problems with the clinics as that we've had with the hospitals. Can you clear that up for me? Because someone asked earlier about their clinic.
Yes.
And I didn't have any problems with my clinic.
Yeah, I think there have been challenges with clinics as well as with hospitals. The nature of those challenges have, in most instances, been somewhat different. I would say where they are similar has to do with the early stages of developing and defining requirements, and then locking down those requirements so that we're able to move expeditiously through the process.
And another issue that maybe the committee needs to deal with, we had a project in Miami that was two smaller projects, and once we put them together, it became a larger, one big project that you all need to come back for us. And maybe we need to develop some kind of authority so that you can move forward, because that held up that project. So we need to work together in areas that we can to make sure that we can expedite the process.
Yes, ma'am, we would appreciate that opportunity. Thank you.
And so with that, and there are many other things. Someone said something about mismanagement, and I want to say part of the problem, let's say in Orlando, part of it, we changed the sites. And in this Denver hospital, it was going to be a joint use facility, and it became a single use facility. So all of those things got to be considered as we discuss and decide how we're going to move forward. And you can't just say it's one item, it's a multiplicity of reasons why projects get delayed. And we need to do our part to make sure that that doesn't happen also. And so with that, Mr. Chairman, I'm very excited about working with you to move the VA forward.
Thank you very much, Ms. Brown. We're all looking forward to working collaboratively with the VA. I would say that the one incident in Miami where there were two projects, actually that was something that this committee uncovered. That was a large project that was purposely split into two so that they could proceed forward. And that's why we had the problem that we did. And, you know, nobody wants to delay anything, but we certainly want to make sure that everybody follows the rules. But with that, thank you, Mr. Gibson, for being here. Mr. Milston and Mr. Caldwell, thank you so much, and you are now excused.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, members.
We're going to go ahead and move forward with our second panel. We're going to hear from Mr. David Wise, Director of Fiscal Infrastructure Issues at the Government Accountability Office, Mr. Roscoe Butler, no stranger to this committee, the Deputy Director for Health Care for the American Legion's Veterans Affairs and Rehabilitation Division, and Mr. Ray Kelly, also no stranger to this committee, Director of the National Legislative Service for the Veterans of Foreign Wars. As per the custom, your statements will be entered into the hearing record. And Mr. Wise, now that you have made it to your seat, we're going to let you go first. We'll recognize you, sir, for 5 minutes.
Yes, it felt good to stand up. Thank you. Chairman Miller, Ranking Member Brown, and members of the committee, I'm pleased to be here today to discuss information from our April 2013 report regarding the construction of new VA major medical facilities. Our report examined the agency's actions to address cost increases and schedule delays for VA projects at Denver, New Orleans, Las Vegas, and Orlando. At the time of our review, VA had 50 major medical facility projects underway at a cost of more than $12 billion, including new construction and renovation of existing medical facilities. For those 4 projects, we originally found that cost overruns ranged from 59% to 144%. Delays range from 14 to 74 months. However, costs and delays have since increased, with cost overruns now ranging from 66% to 144%, and delays ranging from 14 to 86 months, with the potential for further increases. My statement today discusses 3 key issues related to the VA medical facility construction program. 1, the extent of and reasons for cost overruns and schedule delays for the 4 new medical facility projects we reviewed. 2, actions VA has taken to improve its construction management practices. And 3, VA's response to our 2013 recommendations to improve the management of cost, schedule, and scope of these construction projects. When comparing construction project data updates provided by VA for this testimony with the cost and schedule estimates first submitted to Congress, we found that cost increases range from 66 to 144%, representing a total cost increase of over $1.5 billion and an average increase of approximately $376 million per project. Since our 2013 report, some of the projects have experienced further cost increases and delays. For example, VA's reported delays for the 4 major projects now range from 14 to 86 months, with an average delay of 43 months per project. Of those projects, Denver had the highest cost increase and the longest estimated years to complete. Estimated costs increased from $328 million in June 2004 to $800 million as of November 2012. VA moved the estimated completion date from February 2014 to May 2015. However, both these estimates may further increase, and VA has been unable to provide total estimated costs and schedule data for the Denver project at this time. At each of the 4 projects, different factors contributed to cost increases and schedule delay as follows. Changing healthcare needs of the local veteran population expanded the scope of the Las Vegas project. Decisions to change plans from a shared University VA Medical Center to a standalone VA Medical Center affected plans in Denver and New Orleans. Changes to the site location by VA delayed efforts in Orlando. Unanticipated issues, especially environmental, in Las Vegas, New Orleans, and Denver also led to delays. Some of these factors resulted in expensive, cumbersome, and lengthy change orders. Since 2012, VA has taken some steps to improve its construction management process, including creating a construction review council to oversee VA's development and execution of its real property program. The council is intended as a single point of oversight and program accountability. Establishing a new project delivery method known as integrated design and construction, which engages the construction contractor early in the design process to streamline construction and reduce the need for change orders. VA used this procedure in the Denver project, but too late to fully benefit from it. In our 2013 report, we made 3 recommendations to address systemic issues that contributed to overall schedule delays and cost increases, including developing guidance on the use of medical equipment planners as part of the design and planning process, sharing information on the roles and responsibilities of VA construction project management staff, and streamlining the change order process. VA agreed with our recommendations and has taken action to implement them. While we have closed out the recommendations, the impact of these actions may take time to show improvement, especially for ongoing construction projects, depending on several issues, including the relationship between VA and its contractors. Chairman Miller, Ranking Member Brown, and members of the committee, this concludes my formal statement, and I'll be pleased to answer any questions you may have at this time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wise. Mr. Butler, you're recognized.
Thank you. Due to poor planning and budget execution with VA construction management, a project that could have come in under $600 million has spiraled into a $1 billion debacle that has tarnished the good faith of the veterans of Colorado, the hundreds of workers who labored to build that hospital, and honestly, the good faith of veterans across the country. The veterans of America are crying out, enough is enough, and demand better results. Good morning, Chairman Miller, Ranking Member Brown, and members of the committee. On behalf of our National Commander Mike Hamm and the 2.4 million members of the American Legion, I want to say thank you for the scrutiny you are applying to sorting out the unfortunate and unnecessary chaos with VA's construction projects. The veterans of Colorado have waited for a replacement hospital since the late 1990s. 3 VA secretaries made promises but failed to deliver. Now, VA's construction problems have spiraled into epic proportion, especially the Colorado replacement facility. As the American Legion's Deputy Director for Healthcare, I've been an active participant in our organization's System Worth Saving Task Force. Last year, as you know, the chairman of our VNR Commission testified on behalf of the American Legion at a field hearing in Denver, when critical errors were taking place. There appears to be systemic problems with how VA manages their large construction projects. Let's examine the Big 4 projects. In Colorado, they broke ground in 2009, and the replacement facility is still incomplete and is hundreds of millions of dollars in overruns. In Orlando, they broke ground on August 22nd, 2008, and they're hundreds of millions of dollars over budget and have missed deadlines after deadlines. In Las Vegas, they broke ground in 2007, and after numerous delays, the hospital was open. But unfortunately, needed millions of dollars in expansion because they couldn't even meet basic needs like a proper ramp for EMS to drop off patients at their emergency room. In New Orleans, they broke ground on October 24, 2008, and 6 years later, veterans are still waiting for their replacement facility to open. GAO said the average time overdue on these 4 projects is 35 months, and this is just an average. The average cost overruns are $366 million. Again, this is just an average. Frankly, this is unacceptable. Other agencies and private sector organizations continue to build major projects across the nation, yet VA Replacement Hospital on the Fitzsimmons campus continues to be delayed while the cost continues to skyrocket. VA needs to complete their outstanding projects so veterans will no longer be required to use inadequate and outdated facilities. The American people want a first-rate healthcare system for veterans. You look at the internal planning process through the strategic capital investment planning process, and you will see that VA is trying to meet the needs of an expanding veterans population, but mistakes and mismanagement are crippling these projects, and nobody seems to be held accountable. VA also needs to take a long, hard look at how they're managing their construction projects, because the results across the board are unacceptable. All options must be put on the table to ensure no stone is unturned. Steps need to be taken to ensure that future VA hospitals are planned, designed, and built within a transparent, accountable system that puts veterans first. You have projects in 4 states, and who knows how many more are needed as VA expands to meet the needs of our 21st century veterans. Falling behind schedule might be standard practice at VA, but you have to think about what that means. Behind schedule means veterans of Colorado, Florida, and Louisiana are still asking, when is the waiting game going to end? The American thanks the committee for their close attention to the problems veterans face accessing health care. The American Legion is working diligently and tirelessly to keep the focus on the VA hospital in Aurora, as well as VA other construction projects. After a decade of broken promises, American veterans, those who gave 100% of the defense of our nation, are tired of promises and simply ask VA to build them a 21st century world-class VA medical hospital and to get the job done now. After all, American veterans deserve better.
Thank you, Mr. Butler. Mr. Kelly, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, thank you for inviting the Veterans of Foreign Wars. I'm representing the men and women of the Veterans of Foreign Wars and our auxiliary at this hearing today. Over the past few years, it has been very apparent that VA's ability to control cost and deliver major construction projects on time is and should be viewed as a great concern. Veterans are not being served when construction projects take months and years longer than expected to complete, and the price tags inflate as time drags on. Last year, the House passed legislation that would improve VA's major medical facility construction process. These improvements include using medical equipment planners, developing and using a project management plan, peer reviewing all projects, creating a change order metric, and using a design-build process when possible. VA claims they have started using medical equipment planners. This practice will assist in reducing scheduling delays and cost overruns. To ensure VA's construction process can be as efficient as possible, it is important the other provisions are enacted. VA's lack of standardized project management protocol has led to poor communication within VA and between VA and general contractors, which has led to delays and cost overruns. There have been cases identified where separate VA officials have provided contradictory orders to the general contractor. By developing and using a project management plan, all parties at the onset of the project will have a clear understanding of the roles and authorities of each member of that project team. Construction peer excellence review is an important aspect of maintaining a high level of construction quality and efficiency. When used, these review teams are made up of experts in construction management who travel to project sites and evaluate the performance of the project team. While meetings provide important feedback, a separate set of eyes on the project management plan to ensure the plan is in place to make the project come in on time and on budget. VA has historically relied on a design bid build project delivery system, which when entering into contracts to build major medical facility projects. With this model, an architect is selected to design a facility, the design documents are used to secure a bid, and then the successful contractor, bid holder, builds the facility. Design bid build projects often encounter disputes between the customer, in this case VA, and the construction contractor. Because these contracts are generally firm fixed price based on a complete design, the construction contractor is usually responsible for cost overruns unless a change order is issued. This process can be adversarial because neither party wants to absorb the costs associated with the change, and each change order can add months to the project completion date. A design-build project places the architectural engineering company and the construction contractor under one contract. Placing the architect as the lead from the start to finish and having the prime contractor work side by side with the architect allows the architect to be an advocate for VA. Also, the architect and the prime contractor can work together early in the design phase to reduce the number of design errors, and it also allows them to identify and modify the building plans throughout the project. While these initiatives work for improving future projects, the VFW believes a look back at all currently funded major projects should take place to see what steps are needed to finish the nearly 50 partially funded but not complete major VHA construction projects. VA's FY 2015 budget submission showed that there was more than $6 billion available for 49 VHA projects through the end of fiscal year 2013. What the submission does not show is why some projects were initially funded years ago, but little to no progress has been made to complete them. Many of these projects have safety implications and provide specific services for spinal cord injuries and need to be set on course that will bring these projects to completion. VA Strategic Capital Plan, or SCIP, has been a great tool in identifying gaps in access, utilization, and safety. But if a clear plan is not in place to close these gaps, delays in care, safety risks, and increased costs to close these gaps will continue. Mr. Chairman, this concludes my testimony. I'll be happy to answer any questions the committee has.
Thank you very much, Ray. Mr. Kaufman, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Wise, what are some of the key differences between how VA manages major medical facility construction projects compared to federal and private sector stakeholders responsible for similar projects? What are their likely effects of these differences?
Well, Mr. Kaufman, two things kind of stood out to us when we did the work for the April 2013 report. And one was, and I think this has been discussed especially in panel one, the early entry of medical planners, medical equipment planners at the early part of the planning process, which when we discussed our questions and our issues with both the Naval Facilities Engineering Command and with the Army Corps of Engineers, they were both very, this was a very important item to them. These units work hand in glove in order to make sure that you have a parallel and symbiotic relationship between the people who are building the facility as well as those who are bringing in the equipment that the facility needs to house. Obviously, those things need to be completely compatible. Otherwise, you've got some disconnects, and the inevitable result is change orders, which add time and cost to the project. And that's my second point. The change orders, also when we've discussed with people in the private sector as well as with folks at the NAVFAC and the Army Corps, both seemed rather surprised at the amount of time that it took the VA to administer change orders. And I think that was also discussed fairly thoroughly in the first panel, but we saw change orders, I guess it had taken sometimes up to a year to implement, and this causes a lot of problems for the contractor because then he's waiting for payment while this whole thing kind of winds its way through the Veterans Administration's approval process. They've done a couple of things I think that may help in that process. They've raised the threshold a bit, up to $250,000 in some cases. They hired some additional attorneys that deal with the change order process. So, you know, how this will work going forward, we'll see. But those are two things that really stood out when we did the research and the work in order to produce that report.
Okay. And I think in your report you also reference that the Army Corps of Engineers has built similar projects for the Department of Defense on schedule and within budget. Am I correct in that?
They have a track record of building a lot of medical facilities, that's true.
But on schedule and within budget?
Their track record is fairly positive as far as we could tell. They certainly not on the magnitude of what we saw in the four major projects we looked at in the work on the VA.
Okay. Mr. Kelly, in your testimony, you rightly acknowledge that many of VA's major construction projects were funded years ago, but very little progress has been made, giving rise to safety implications. What would you recommend VA do in the future to expedite its processes in order to avoid these same mistakes?
There needs to be a prioritization of these, and the SCIP process does that, but then on the implementation side, there seems to be a failing on that prioritization. So we've got 9 of 12 seismic correction facilities that are partially funded at some phase. Some of them have been funded since 2010, and no money's been spent on them. And we need to understand why that money has been allocated and no progress has been made. And should we have entered into that contract to begin with if we weren't ready to start the project as soon as the contract was completed? What missing link is causing that wait? And what is that money having to be repurposed to another program, and now we're waiting for money to be repurposed so we can start it? There's a lot of questions on the timing of funding and where that funding is sitting.
Okay. Mr. Wise, the GAO report states that the problems experienced at the audited construction projects were representative of systemic problems throughout the VA. Could you elaborate on how these problems extend beyond just the facilities you assessed?
Well, if you look back at the 3 recommendations that we made, they point, and this is generally how GAO works, we're looking for systemic issues that have a broader impact or a broader effect. And when we looked at the 3 recommendations we came up with, it had to do, that dealt with the lack of communication and the inability to pinpoint exactly who's responsible for what, the issue with change order administration, and those kinds of problems. And we saw that these are the kind of things that have broad implications in terms of being able to administer what are very complex and very expensive projects.
Very well. And so I think in your report, you said that each of the hospitals under construction at that time, and I think there were 4, were, I think, over several $100 million each on average over budget, and about 3 years behind schedule on average. Is that correct? And then would the Aurora situation be the worst one out of the 4?
Aurora had the most egregious overruns, both in terms of cost and delay.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Thank you very much, Ms. Brown.
Oh, I'm gonna.
Mr. Chicano.
Yeah. Mr. Wise, you know, before I came to Congress, I served on a humble community college district board, and I was elected, and we had bonding authority that allowed 55% of the local voters to approve capital construction bonds, and you know, suddenly my district was dealing with upwards of a $1 billion program after we leveraged the money. It seemed to me that that cost overruns, the change orders would frequently come before my committee. I'm wondering, where was Congress's role in oversight? Is that any part of your recommendations as part of your GAO report, that somehow the oversight function of Congress, the subcommittee of this committee, should have been regularly informed about where things were with the design relationship with the contractor? I mean, how did this get out from, well, you're saying that the DOD has a better track record within its own bureaucracy of managing the building of hospitals?
Well, sorry, go ahead.
How is it that, how could the accountability be tightened up here?
Yeah, the relationship between the committee or the subcommittee and the Veterans Administration is not something I'm, totally privy to. But what I can say is that, when we looked at the kind of activities going on in the Veterans Administration, we saw that there was certainly a number of issues to do with the cost overruns and the delays that were extensive. And so it's fair to assume that in some kind of normal reporting process that this is something that people who are providing the money. We make our recommendations, obviously, to the administration, to the federal agencies, because we work for Congress. We're doing the work on the behalf of the committee. And so hopefully the work we do makes the committee more aware, and then the committee then is able to take positive action and work with the Veterans Administration to try to improve these projects and hopefully provide better services, more timely services, and cost-effective services to the veteran community.
I'm just referencing my experience as a local public official managing taxpayer dollars, capital construction dollars. and the frequency with which we would have to get progress reports from the staff as the elected officials. I'm just wondering how effective it is for an administration, a department like the VA, to be able to provide that sort of accountability. I'm just wondering if we have staffed up our oversight subcommittee enough, given up enough resources so that it is able to inject itself on a regular basis to manage these hundreds of millions of dollars. I am just astounded. I'm trying to find enough money to fund graduate medical education. People don't know that we fund nearly 100% of the medical residency in this country, and we're facing a shortage of doctors, both in the public sector and within the VA. And I'm thinking about the hundreds of millions of dollars that we could have saved on these cost overruns to fund the education of these doctors. Mr. Chairman, I would ask whether or not we are funding our oversight function enough on this committee to be able to oversee what goes on in that department. I don't see how else we're going to be able to hold the department accountable without enough of our oversight committee being able to be able to review these projects and to make sure that the project management is adequate.
Yield?
I know you have a background in this area as well.
If the gentleman would yield, yes, and we have asked for additional dollars. Last year, we were given additional dollars by the Speaker. We have asked for additional budget. Ms. Brown and I have talked together, as has our staff, to hire additional forensic investigators in regards to computers and budgetary issues as it relates to these construction issues. So most definitely, our oversight role has been beefed up quite a bit since we took over this particular committee.
Just 30 seconds.
I'll yield.
Thank you. However, I don't think that we want to get into the cost overrun. I have, in the Orlando situation, I spent 3 hours with VA, but I also spent 3 hours with the contractors. So it is not just one agency that is at fault. It's a communication, and I mean, did you do the research on the, sir, Mr. Wise, did you do the research on the Orlando office and why some of the problems, why it took so long to move forward?
Well, Madam, I do recall in a little bit earlier statement you made, you certainly alluded to one of the major reasons that had resulted in the problems with Orlando is the movement, I think it was several times, of the site location changed.
Whoever was in charge. If the Democrats was in charge, it would move to one city. If the Republicans was in charge, it moved to another. So, I mean, we need to take the politics out of building hospitals also. And, you know, in the end, the secretary should have the authority to decide what is in the best interest of the VA. And that's, I was able to pull all of the players together, and we was able to move forward. So you can't just say that it's one thing that have caused these problems. It's a multiplicity, and when I said we have been part of the problem. For over 25 years, we were talking about a hospital in Orlando. It's ludicrous. We have the growth in Central Florida. We need that hospital up and operational, and it will be, I hope in my lifetime, to be open in the next couple of months. I hear back, but the point I'm making is that we can do our oversight and we can do our investigation, but we don't need to get into the business of change orders. I mean, if so, we need to, you know, go to the administration. We have oversight to make sure they're doing what they're supposed to do.
Now,
I yield back.
Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman's time has expired.
Thank you.
Again, you take mine, you take his. But yeah, I don't believe anybody on this committee can say that we've politicized anything within our purview. And I would say that this decision to put the facility where it is now was done under a different administration, and had it been a Republican administration at this point, we would be going after them just like we are today. It's for the veterans of this country, not for a political reason. I need to go ahead and go on
Sure.
to.
If I could follow up with you after committee.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Yes, sir. Ms. Radewagen, do you have any questions that you'd like to ask? Okay, thank you very much. Ms. Custer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wanted to ask Mr. Wise about your examination and this comparison of the, particularly the Army Corps and their oversight of the DoD facilities, and what recommendations you would have going forward for the VA, or do you have an opinion as to whether or not Congress should consider the Army Corps, because of their expertise, because of all their experience, supervising construction of large medical facilities at the VA going forward?
That's a good question, an interesting question. And it sounded like from what I heard on the first panel today that that's something that's on the table. So it certainly seems worthy of consideration. It's not something we've examined in any detail, but it appears that VA certainly is looking to the Army Corps for some of its expertise in helping it to resurrect the situation in Aurora and get it moving again. And perhaps that could be a model. It's something that looks like the Deputy Secretary is certainly open to, and I presume he'll be consulting with the committee and others to make that determination once they move forward on this particular project and see how things go. And it does sound like they've gotten a number of Army Corps people working in the construction area in the OACL in the VA. So perhaps that they are beginning to adopt some of those methods that have been used by the Army Corps. So it sounds like from what I heard this morning, and this is really the first I've heard it in detail, is that seems to be an idea that's on the table. And I guess it's up to the various parties to see how it plays out.
That did sound encouraging, the hiring of people with this kind of expertise and this methodology of oversight for projects this size. And I'm just wondering for our friends in the VSO community, Mr. Kelly and Mr. Butler, do you have an opinion, or does your organization have an opinion about this notion of looking into the future now, particularly in relation to the reforms that have been passed, as to whether the VA should be creating such large hub facilities at such an expense? I'm picking up on my colleague Mr. Takano's testimony. We can all think of lots of great uses for these billions of dollars to provide health care across this great country. Do you have an opinion about this, about the focus on these large tertiary facilities?
Yes, ma'am. I don't think you can wholesale say that large facilities should go by the wayside, or that we should only use large facilities. You have to look case by case. Large metropolitan areas are going to have large hospitals that are veteran-centric. But as you look around the country, there are services that are underutilized within VA, and we're building a facility and underutilizing a service just because we need to have that service. We need to start looking at public-private partnerships to fill those holes. The hub and spoke method that you were talking about, having a central area and then having areas outside of that are more convenient, working with partner hospitals that can provide a service that's just underutilized but needed in the community. There's no need to have on staff a cardiology staff if they're doing 1 or 2 heart surgeries a day, when across the street they're doing 20 or 30. And they've got the staff and the expertise to do that. Why are we spending resources on that when it could be put somewhere else for need within that facility? So VFW is open to looking at those public-private partnerships, developing new ways to do that, but I can't say that never build a large hospital again.
Sure, yeah, and I agree. We have a wonderful, at the White River Junction, Vermont, although right on the border, so we consider it our facility in New Hampshire as well. They have a great relationship with Dartmouth Medical School, and that's what I'm trying to, not only is it expensive? The example you gave about the cardiac surgery, it's not even safe in some circumstances if they're not doing the volume. So my time is up, but Mr. Butler, if you have anything to add, and I'm not suggesting, by the way, that we don't build any more of these, but I just more focus on getting the resources where they're needed. And I come from a rural district. It's not an urban center.
I would say agree that you have to look at it on a case-by-case basis, but the challenge for the VA is the average age of a VA medical center. You know, a lot of the facilities have outlived their life cycle, and so VA needs to invest and reinvest in their medical facilities, whether it's building a hub and spoke facility or expanding upon its other additional resources. The one thing that the American Legion does not support is that we do not support vouchering out care. We don't support shutting down the VA system and turning the VA system into a voucher system. We support that the VA system is for American veterans, and the VA should maintain its system of health care for our American veterans and continue to build upon what it already has.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I appreciate your service. Thank you. Mr. Chair, I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. O'Rourke.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To Mr. Wise, when we recently got a report back from the Office of Inspector General on performance issues at the El Paso VA, and we got it last month, we asked, our follow-up question to Dr. Day was, what is of the 128 parts of the system, which is the best performer? And his response was, I can't single out one, but those medical facilities that are affiliated with an academic institution perform far better than the average VA medical facility. So my question to you is, why was the decision made to separate Denver from a medical school, and how did that contribute to some of the problems that you've uncovered in your report?
Well, to the first part of your question, I'm not exactly sure why, although I believe there was some issues about governance that were the university and the VA were unable to resolve about how it would be run, the administration of the shared facility. But that it contributed to, the second part was about the contribution to the delay and overrun, right?
Right.
Yeah, that was definitely a factor because once the original idea, the design was based upon that idea of a shared facility, and once that fell off the table, then you got into a situation where you needed to go back and to do redesign, and then VA became responsible for a lot more costs than it had expected to share at the time. So the VA was bearing up on a lot of standalone costs that were, at that point, rather unexpected. So all this resulted in all sorts of change orders and different machinations with the contractors, and a lot of the issues that were discussed in the first panel came to fruition when this partnership dissolved.
And that also happened in New Orleans, did you say, or did someone mention?
Yeah, there was also a situation in New Orleans, I believe.
Where it was affiliated and then the
Louisiana
affiliation
State
was separated?
University, LSU, it was a similar situation, a partnership that was originally intended with a academic institution, also didn't manage to go didn't manage to go forward, and that also contributed to some of the delays and overruns in New Orleans.
I will follow up with the VA. I'm really interested in understanding why they made that decision to separate, if in fact VA medical facilities affiliated with academic institutions outperform the average. Did the GAO, did you look at accountability for the mistakes made related to these facilities?
Our parameters in this engagement were really to look at what happened and to try to identify the systemic issues that were behind it that caused it to happen, and try to identify some recommendations that would hopefully help mitigate it happening going forward.
And I'll say that I understand the scope of your study, but one of the systemic problems that we have is a culture that has not historically valued accountability. I'm not speaking about current leadership. I fully believe that Secretary Gibson and Secretary McDonald and their team fully understand this and are trying to change the culture, but I would say that that has contributed to problems. And one of my follow-up questions to the VA, perhaps I'll submit it for the record, is Secretary Gibson said those responsible for some of these mistakes were removed from their positions. And I don't know if that is a term of art, meaning that they were fired or that they were transitioned into some other position within the VA. In other words, was there personal accountability for very grievous mistakes where you're taking resources in a zero-sum system away from potentially facilities in El Paso to pay for facilities in Aurora, Colorado, and you have veterans in El Paso who aren't getting the service they need. That's the urgency behind the question. And I realize I only have a minute left, and so to follow up on Ms. Custer's question for Mr. Butler and Mr. Kelly, taking out the extremes, which is, continuing with the status quo, or as you said, Mr. Butler, privatizing, voucherizing VA medical care. Let's just assume we're not going to do either of those. After mistakes of this proportion, what would your membership be open to in terms of a different system, in terms of having, for example, what I call the Summers model, core competencies delivered at a world-class level, very accessible out of the VA, and then perhaps non-core competencies, diabetes, getting your teeth fixed, having something not related to your service is not performed at the VA, but somehow managed out of there. I don't know if you, Mr. Butler, or Mr. Kelly could quickly comment on that.
Well, I think for the American Legion, our resolution supports the VA remaining intact as a system of health care for American veterans. We support that VA can refer patients out. We supported the VACA with the provision that a sunset provision be added into the VACA. So we support veterans when they need to go outside the VA system to obtain their care. Then we surely understand that need and that requirement. But our position is that the VA system is a VA system for American veterans, and that system should be maintained.
Mr. Chair, could I have 20 seconds for Mr. Kelly?
You may.
Thank you.
I think the goal is to provide care for veterans that's conducive for them individually. We have found under VACA, under the choice, that we've done a survey of our membership, and pretty close to 60% of them, even when they had a choice, stayed with VA. They wanted to wait a little longer because that's where their continuum of care was. So we need to look at all these factors when we start making decisions. Yeah, there are areas where veterans are not being served properly by VA, and opening up other opportunities outside of VA, whether it's short-term, long-term, need to be looked at. Specialty services that you said, diabetes care may be an area where it's more suitable for that to be contracted out in certain areas. But we can't, again, have one solution to be the fix. We need to look at every opportunity to improve delivery of care for veterans.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right, everybody look outside. It's snowing. It's heavily, even for Coloradan.
Yeah.
Ms. Brown?
Thank you. I guess I'm stuck here, so I can just go ahead and ask my questions now. Mr. Butler, I have a question for you. I think my position is closer to yours, but we do know that there are some financial restraints that we have. And I guess my question is, in some areas, rural areas, let's don't even deal with healthcare. When we talk about cemetery facilities, in some areas, I don't know whether it makes sense to build a full-fledged cemetery. Maybe we could do something partnering with the local community to expand it. And maybe in some rural areas that we could, do some partnerships with a wing in a hospital. I mean, it's no one answer. What would you all be open to?
Well, I think under your existing authorities, they allow for a lot of those opportunities, what you just mentioned. So under the current authorities for healthcare, you have your fee basis authority, you have the new legislation that was introduced through VACA, you have also PC3, and the American Legion support all of those options. So I would agree that it's not one option that fix everything. You have to look at all of the available opportunities and determine what's best for American veterans. And that's the key, what's best for American veterans, and to ensure that their needs are being taken care of. and in a system that's designed for veterans. And if VA refers those veterans outside because they don't have the resources or service to provide that care, then that's fine, as long as VA has the appropriate funding to meet the needs of veterans.
Mr. Kelly?
I'm with Mr. Butler on this, is that there's no cookie cutter solution. Veterans in rural Montana need to be thought differently than in downtown Chicago. And those veterans' expectations of delivery of care are different as well. So we need to take that into effect. I think there's an understanding, if you live in a rural, remote area, that life's a little tougher, and it's going to be a little tougher for you to get that care, and there's some acceptance of that. And but we need to look at ways to prevent, in the middle of a nice snowstorm, allowing people or insisting on people driving several hundred miles for just a follow-up care that could be seen in the community and as Mr. Butler said, those authorities are there. We need to exercise them. We need to not make that the exception in some cases and make it the rule until we have suitable solutions in place.
Well, you know, I was amazing because I'm pretty old school, that a lot of the veterans like the telecommunications, telemedicine, wherein that they can do a lot from home, and then if they need to come in, it's a difference. So what's your opinion of telemedicine?
Absolutely. We've had veterans who swear by it, just as you said. And even within a community outpatient patient clinic, I'll use myself as an example. I went in for my annual physical. My primary care saw a mole on my back that she didn't like. She said, "Do you have a few minutes? Let's have somebody take a picture of it. We'll send it up to Baltimore. They'll look at it, and if you need to be seen, you'll be seen." I didn't have to go to Baltimore for a second appointment. That was sent up there. Within a few days, they came back and said, "Nah, it's okay." So saved me a trip, saved VA resources, and quality health care was served. So we need to look at all avenues again.
Mr. Butler?
I would agree. I was at a VA hospital in Georgia where they had a virtual lab wherein veterans were being treated in their OR, not OR, but in their ICU. And the doctor was somewhere else at another place monitoring the veterans. So there are many advances in modern medicine that we need to bring all together to ensure that all of the advanced technologies out there that are made available are being used to treat our American veterans.
And Mr. Wise, in closing, thank you for your testimony. As I said, it's many issues. For example, I know a lot more about the New Orleans situation than I do probably the Denver. I've been there several times. I'm very instrumental in making sure that that particular New Orleans project moved forward because the hospital there was wiped out completely by Katrina.
Right.
And so, you know, in visiting the area, I knew it was not any other facilities nowhere near for the veterans to have the services that they needed. So it was going to be a joint between them and the universities. Part of the problem was the governor, the mayor. I mean, it was a mess. So I'm happy that it is close to ending, coming to be open, and maybe we can find out exactly when it's going to be open. Not you, I know, but the secretary.
Okay.
Thank you, though.
Thank you very much, Ms. Brown. I appreciate the good work and the comments. I have one follow-up question, Mr. Wise. I think in your written testimony, you stated, actually it was your updated report of 2015. You reached out to VA and asked them for an estimated final cost for the Orlando project, and you were not given that cost estimate. At least that's what I've been in.
I think that was for the Denver project, that reference, no, I believe.
It is the Denver project?
That's the one we couldn't get final, well, same as what Mr. Gibson said this
Yeah, I
morning.
just was asking for Ms. Brown's hospital. I was under the impression that it was the Orlando project, but I apologize. And with that, the one thing I think we can all agree, the way health care is delivered today is much different than it was delivered years ago. The idea of building massive hospitals at over $1 billion apiece is not a sustainable model. We have to look at other ways and options. Nobody on this committee is talking about dismantling the VA when we talk about providing choice to people on their health care. And I believe that we all want to work together to make sure that the veterans get the health care that they've earned, when they need it, where they need it, and then what they get is quality health care. So with that, we will adjourn.
Hey, how are you? Good to see you again.
It's hilarious.
Hey, how are you?
That's one issue that's
Okay.
The trick is that you go to your landfill hospital and